Okay, we talked briefly about the lease. You've heard of problems with the demolition clause. Do you guys do financial statements every year for your corporation? How many of you do audited financial statements? Probably none of you, right? Nobody takes their documents to an auditor, spends $20,000 to $30,000 to do an audit. Guess what? We've seen a lease, and the lease says every year the dentist has to get audited financial statements and share the results with the landlord. Do you think our client bought that practice? No. We've seen leases where the landlord has a clause in the lease itself that says, yeah, I'm happy to consent to transferring the lease from the seller to the purchaser. I just need 5% of the purchase price. Happy to do it, 5%. Does that kill deals? Oh, yeah. And another thing is, David likes to talk about, what are the two things that landlords love, David?
Landlords love collecting signatures for guarantees and love having everyone else pay for everything.
Everything. They ask for money all the time. So a guarantee. You've sold the practice. How would you like to be on the hook for the next 10, 15 years in case the purchaser defaults? Yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem. So leases kill deals. Landlords kill deals. Hence the picture. Very fitting, right?
But there are strategies. If you're thinking about a transition, even if you have a renewal coming up in a year or 2 years, you can work now to try to remove some of these negative parts of a lease to make it more attractive. That hopefully can drive the higher sale price.
Right. Okay, now we're at the agreements, the formal agreements of purchase and sale. You guys have all bought real estate at one point or another. When you sign the offer, that doesn't mean you own the house, right? It's legal paperwork that has a bunch of conditions in it. It takes all the key terms from the letter of intent, incorporates it. Unfortunately, we kill a lot of trees in the process. We negotiate back and forth. All the little bells and whistles have to be in there. Finally, there's the closing. Oh, as part of the closing, you as the seller will most likely want to sell the shares, I've got it right here, of this thing. How many of you guys have this thing? What is this thing? It's called a minute book. This is a corporation. This is a legal human being. Okay? Can't have babies. But you want to basically sell what's inside. This is my professional corporation. Your share certificates. You want to sell these. Why? Why do you want to sell the shares of a corporation instead of the assets that this corporation or yourself might own? Capital gains exemption. Yes. What is the lifetime capital gains exemption all about? Who can explain it? Something about $800,000 and saving taxes. Okay, I'm going to explain it to you. See, this, when we create this corporation for a dentist, it's worthless, right? It's got no assets, nothing. So you give it $1. It puts that $1 into its bank account. And what do you get back? You get the certificate. How much did the certificate cost you? $1. Okay, that's the cost of the certificate. Now, you're going to work this corporation. You're going to transfer your practice to this corporation. This corporation is going to be valuable over time, and it's going to appreciate in value. What happened to your share? It also, because you own it, and it owns all these things, it appreciated too. So when you go to sell it, let's say you sold it for $800,000 and $1. What is the gain? What's the difference between what you sold it for and what it cost you? $800,000. And the government basically says, in your lifetime, if you sell the shares of this thing and you realize a gain of $800,000, normally you have to cut that gain in half. Half of $800,000 is $400,000. And you're going to pay your full tax rate on that $400,000. So if you're paying close to 50% tax on that $400,000 taxable capital gain, what's the tax owing? Close to $200,000. That's a big tax bill. If you qualify, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about how to qualify, you don't have to pay it. That's a lot of money. Here's the best part. You can actually multiply. If you and your spouse both own shares, the correct shares, you get to save up to $200. Your wife gets, or husband gets to save up to $200. You can have your kids involved if you do it right, and you have to plan ahead. Okay, so now we're going to get into some in-depth tax stuff, okay? And this is the part where you want to pay attention. There's a bunch of rules. There's about 4 tests that you have to meet to qualify. And I hope to God you guys remember this when we're done. You ready? Norm, you ready? Okay. Test number 1. Generally, you have to own the shares for at least 2 years before you sell. Okay? Everyone's nodding. Good. David, is there an exception to the rule?
There is an exception to the rule. if you do this process of incorporation contemporaneous with the sale of your practice, that's an exception, and you can still qualify even if you have not held the shares for 2 years.
So if you haven't incorporated and you want to sell sooner than 2 years from now, don't incorporate. Wait until you're about to sell, like David said. We will incorporate your practice, transfer your practice to your company. You'll get shares back in exchange for transferring your practice, and that's all done on a tax-free basis. And then you sell the shares to the purchaser, and you can qualify for the lifetime capital gains exemption. Okay, so there's a general rule, 2 years, but there's an exception to the rule. Everybody get it so far? Okay.
Next
Rule
part.
number 2. For the 2 years leading up to you selling your shares of your corporation, at least 50% of this corporation's assets have to be active business assets. At least 50%. What does that mean? Your practices are active business, right? They're not passive. What's a passive asset? Something that sits there, and it could be real estate, it could be excess cash, it could be securities, life insurance, any of those things. They just sit there, and the type of money that they make you is passive. It's not active. And you never want your non-active business assets to be more than 50% of your total assets for the 2 years leading up to the sale. Okay? And there are techniques that you can use to purify your corporation throughout those 2 years. Everybody get it? You can use a hold account. Yeah, Dean?
The real estate that owns your building.
This is a good one. So, is real estate always going to be considered non-active business asset? The CRA will take a look at all of the assets and determine on a case-by-case basis if they're active business. If you have a building that houses your dental practice and doesn't have any other tenants, and the intent was always to just house your dental practice, and then it would probably be viewed as an active business asset. However, if more than 50% of this building that also houses your practice is rented out to tenants and it's earning income, non-active business assets, non-active income, you're going to be in troubled territory, and the entire asset could be offside. And if it's offside, you could be offside when you look at the totality of your assets. Does that make sense, Dean? Okay.
So good planning ahead of time helps with this.
Yes, good planning. And it is a little tricky, expensive. You have to get lawyers and accountants involved if you discover that you don't qualify, because then you have to start taking assets out of your company, right? And there's lots of techniques. And in fact, I'm writing a few articles right now, and I'll post them on the website, that discusses the various techniques to purify your company over time. Okay, the third test, 3 out of 4. It's even worse. On the day that you sell the shares of your professional corporation, 90%, at least 90% of the company's assets need to be active business. So you really need to purify everything, especially on the day of the sale. You cannot have more than 10% of the assets being non-active business. Okay? Finally, the final test. Not all shares will qualify for the lifetime capital gains exemption. Okay? The ones that qualify are the growth shares, the equity shares, the ones that appreciate in value. David, what's the other type of share that won't qualify for the lifetime capital gains exemption?
Colloquially, people will call them dividend sprinkling shares. They're the ones that you might pay $1 or $2 for, and either the person could sell them back to the company, or the company can buy them back for that same price that they were purchased for. So there is no growth. The value always remains the same.
Right. Now, you have those types of shares because you don't trust your spouse or children, and you want the ability to buy them back for $1. But the difficulty is they don't appreciate in value. So some dentists, unfortunately, come to us and they say, I'm ready to sell. I got a $2 million practice. My spouse and my children, they own shares. And we take a look at the minute book, and we discover they're given the wrong shares. They were given these dividend sprinkling shares that can be redeemed for $1. That's a big problem. What can you do? You have to clean it up, and it's done through something called an estate freeze. But then once we clean it up, guess what? We go back to rule number 1, which is 2 years of waiting, right? And that exception to the rule won't apply in that circumstance. So it was pretty bad for us to tell the dentist what had happened and how things got screwed up. So those are the main tests to qualify for the lifetime capital gains exemption. Heavy duty tax stuff, right? But I hope it makes sense. We're going to move on. The closing. There's an exchange of documents. We took this picture today from the back of Dean's car. So there's an exchange of funds. And on the closing, we celebrate. This is our office. This is some of the tequila that I've got in the office. There's only 2 bottles you can get in Canada. How much is this one, David?
About $50.
And how much is that one?
It's 94.
Nice try. This one's 100, and this one's 150. David doesn't really drink this stuff. He doesn't know, so sometimes I like to put him on the spot. The one at the very end, it tastes like butterscotch. It's a 6-year-old bottle of Herradura Supreme. It's $400, and it's not really available in Canada. So we travel, and when we travel, we bring back tequila. If you have ever tried a very nice bottle of tequila, you might get addicted. So
that's when I drink when Michael's not.
That's why it's going down. Okay. Oh, we've got one more. Post-closing. You may be associating. You may have the worst boss in the world. So just be mindful of that and pick your purchaser properly. You can conduct interviews with purchasers after they've submitted letters of intent, and you might not always go for the person who put the highest bid, but you want the right fit. Okay? Finally, Jamaica. Here's the Jamaica program in a nutshell. Sandals and Beaches are donating the rooms, the meals, and the drinks and the amenities for free for dentists who come down. And we're all going down in August. There's a group of about 45 of us, and you're there for 10 days if you volunteer for 5 of those 10 days. And so what we're doing is we are bringing dentists down. A lot of our clients, they're coming down. The cost, it's a subsidized workation. The cost is a flight to Montego Bay, which was $700 round trip, and paying the admin fee. It's a project fee that goes to this not-for-profit that's doing it in conjunction with Sandals, and that admin fee is $800 American. So it came out to about $1,700 all in for a place that you would otherwise pay $4,500 to stay for 10 days.
No,
10 days. No, it's 10 days. Yeah. So I've been to this place. I've paid the regular price. Now I'm going back to do dental outreach, and we're going end of August the 28th to September the 6th. You get to have fun. You get to help out. A lot of fill and drill extractions. And if you're interested, come to us, because we are basically cutting off registration of volunteers at the end of this month. So we're almost full, which is great. And we're hoping to do this on an annual basis. Sandals has told us that they've been doing this for 13 years with this U.S. not-for-profit. We're bringing it to Canada, and they've said, you know what, if you guys can help us out in St. Lucia, Bahamas, Turks, we're happy to accommodate. How many of you guys have been to Turks? Fantastic, right, Dean? Best place in the world. And if you've never heard of Beaches, Beaches is the family version of Sandals. They have a license with Sesame Street, so my kid loves it. They've got daycare, nanny services. They've got Sesame Street shows every night. I know you guys probably don't have kids as young as mine, but it's a lot of fun, beach parties, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And if it's all inclusive, you can't go wrong.
And the best part of all is you actually give back to a population that really needs good oral health care and doesn't really have ready access to it. So you actually get to make a difference in people's lives.
A lot of these people, their parents will be working full-time, make about $60 American a week. They've probably never seen a dentist. And they're so grateful that they're willing to bring you, a coconut or cook you a lunch or something like that. So we go out into the local churches and we help set up. We bring our sundries down, and they've got the chairs ready for us. So it's a pretty awesome program. And Dave and I are really proud. We're going down as well. And your spouses can come too. I'm bringing my wife and my child. They're not volunteering though. They're hanging out in the resort. And you can also choose to stay in the resort and work on the staff there. So think about it and let us know if you're interested. Make sure you get your wills updated after you close. Summary, David?
Get educated, get protected, and then make the most or save the most.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks, guys.